We're going to start the recording. Again, my name is Chelsea Cohen. I am the co-founder of Restock.com, and I'm going to be talking to you about inventory management best practices, but also going to be covering restock limits, being able to understand how restock limits work, how we can use that knowledge to our advantage. And then lastly, what I hinted at in the email that was sent out is I'm going to be talking about the trucking industry. I think that most of our stuff, hopefully for fourth quarter, is already here, has already reached its destination cities, and trucking is going to be vital to making sure that your inventory gets received on time. There is a specific deadline for when your inventory needs to be received to be eligible for being checked in for the Black Friday weekend, as well as for following that being able to sell for the holidays. I personally experienced at one point my inventory being lost throughout the entire holiday season, specifically because I sent it the wrong way. So I will be talking about different ways to send inventory, the ramifications of how not just Amazon generally moves that inventory and what the impact of sending it these various different ways are, but how specifically this season the trucking and the Amazon check-in portion of your business is going to be affected, and what are those things that you can do to make sure that you choose the right modes of getting your inventory into Amazon so they actually get checked in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start by sharing my screen. Fantastic. Let's see. Okay, let me know if you can see my screen. Give me a little thumbs up, something. I assume that you can see my screen. If you have any questions, type them in the chat. We will be doing a Q&A portion, but type them in the chat, because if they're relevant to what we're talking about at that moment, we can jump into them. All right, so we're going to be talking about inventory strategies for restock limits and the supply chain chaos that we are all facing, as I mentioned. So we have about an hour together, and I want to make sure that we are able to deliver to you essentially what we are going to be covering. So let's discuss what we're going to be covering. So we're going to talk about some key inventory systems that we need to develop in order to avoid stockouts and overstocking. We're going to be talking about the 3 triggers to pull to avoid your restock limits crashing if you do experience a stock out. So maybe Amazon's not checking something in fast enough. What are those things that you should be doing to make sure that your restock limits don't plummet due to those things? Sorry, I forgot to change the bonus. The bonus before was a restock limits hack. It's actually now that restock limits hack is well known on the Restock. So if you're interested in that restock limits hack, it has worked for some people. It hasn't been working as easily as it was in the third quarter. So check out Restock. We update all of the restock limits information that we get, and you can check that out there. The bonus today that I'm going to be giving you is this trucking data. This trucking data comes straight from a friend of mine, Sebastiano Scazzi. He runs amazing logistics, and he's just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to all of the ins and outs of warehousing, of pallet and container and carton optimization, which I'm becoming obsessed about, as well as trucking and what are the best modes of trucking your inventory into Amazon to ensure that they get checked in. What happens if you have inventory get lost? What should you be doing? And so that's all the stuff that we're going to be talking about towards the end. And then solutions to help you implement these systems quickly and easily, of course, and then we'll do a Q&A portion. All right, so a little bit about me. I've been selling on Amazon since 2014 and started to become a mentor in the Amazon space really kind of by accident. We were doing some things successfully. A lot of people started asking us questions. And so we put up a website to put out videos to no longer have to answer the same question over and over again to people. And then we started working with people like Ryan Moran. We did some mentorship for the Amazing Selling Machine Group, which is amazing.com. And then we also started speaking on stage, podcasts. I started talking about copywriting. And then veered into inventory management in 2018 when I realized that that was the #1 thing that was harming my business that I could actually control. I can't control pricing problems where you've got price erosion in a certain product line. you can't control what Amazon's fees are going to be charged, but you can control whether you have stock or not, and whether you're overstocking and incurring a lot of storage fees and loan interest costs. So that's a bit about me. Like I mentioned, in 2018, really dove into inventory management. There were things like, inventory getting stranded during Christmas time. I lost a lot of money that Christmas season. I'd experienced things like losing out on an entire month's worth of income for my top seller due to stocking out. I had overstocked in some products, paying thousands in extra storage fees, loan interest. If this sounds familiar to you, that's probably why you're on this call. So that's something that I started to look at for solutions for. I tried to build my own system using Excel. I know we have some people on this call that are using Excel. Oops, I didn't end the poll. Let's end the poll. I know that there's some people who are using Excel, and I found it very time consuming. It's also very prone to error. In fact, I read a statistic that 90% of spreadsheets have some sort of errors in them that can be extremely vital to disrupting the output of the results of those forms. So looked at other things like software. There were software algorithms too fancy, too confusing, way too expensive. These magic black box numbers where they won't tell you how they got the number, but they'll just expect you to trust it. So I talked to some friends of mine, probably heard the same thing. Everyone says, we've tried everything, nothing works. We're back to spreadsheets, which is how I ended up here, because I figured if spreadsheets are working, what about them are working? What about them are not working? And that's essentially where we basically started, is building our model off of that. So what I'm going to teach you is all the things that we've discovered in terms of inventory management best practices, specifically for the e-commerce seller, and how to roll those best practices into your daily and weekly practices so that you can ensure that you continue to stay in stock, as well as the ability to pivot within this industry that's extremely important right now. Flexibility is the key to surviving what we're facing. And those who are not working flexibly are not going to, they're going to end up stocking out at some point. All right, so let's go ahead and moving forward. Okay, so yeah, so I spent 3 years building the software. I'm not going to get into all the ins and outs, but we work on a daily basis with sellers. We get information from sellers when changes are coming, when questions are arising around certain subject matters. We love to dive in and figure out what are the new programs Amazon has coming out. How are these programs working? Why should we ship things certain ways? Why should we start putting our time and our energy into those programs? What is it going to benefit us from the logistics and inventory side of things? So by the end of this call, I'm going to actually give you some tools. So if you're not a SoStock user, these are some tools that we have created to start to implement some of these best practices. One of these is a DIY inventory spreadsheet. This spreadsheet works similar to how our software works. It has a lot of the best practices baked into it. It doesn't have everything, of course, that can be done, but it gets you part of the way there. So if you have a handful of SKUs and you're not ready to adopt an actual software, this might be a good place to start. The other things that we'll be giving you are something called inventory minded marketing. This is a planner to help your marketing team and your inventory team become more in sync. And this is something that we found was one of the top reasons why sellers stocked out, because their marketing and their inventory were not working together. It's more important than ever to have that happen, especially with restock limits. And you'll get an Amazon inventory planner to help to make your marketing team, inventory team, and even your cash flow management or accounting team be more in sync on this entire plan. Everyone should be a part of this entire plan, because if you're out of inventory, you're out of stock. And if you don't have the money for the inventory, or you're delaying your purchases of inventory because you don't have enough cash, all of that affects how marketing can actually perform. So every team affects the other. And then lastly, our inventory management cross-department SOPs. If you're using SoStock and you haven't accessed these will be extremely valuable. Again, I'm going to send these out in an email. I highly recommend, as you scale up your business, utilizing these. They were built out by Escala. Escala works with top agencies, aggregators, top Amazon sellers, and they built this out specifically for us, specifically for the SoStock inventory management system. All right, so let's talk about what I like to call the 3 pillars of inventory management. Essentially, you want to know 3 things. You want to know how much inventory to produce. You want to know by when do you need to place that order, and then how is it going to get there? And those are basically the simplicity of it. There's a lot of complexity to break down when we get into those topics, but that is the simple overview of what we're looking at with inventory management. So we're going to start with calculations. So calculations always start with your velocity. We need to have the baseline number of how we're actually calculating the amount of inventory we need. We do what's called daily adjusted velocity. We don't look at total sales over a period of time. We actually want to break that down and look at what is the daily average. And the reason that we call it adjusted is because there are certain things within the data that can start to throw off your information. Things like sales spikes and stock outs. So if you have stock outs or you have sales spikes, your daily average is going to be skewed improperly. So this is how daily adjusted velocity works. So we use our averages. We can also look at last year's sales. This is an option that a lot of people use, especially during their peak seasons like the holidays. And then factoring out sales spikes. For example, October this year, we had someone who wrote in and said, you know, my sales are up 23% for the year, but they're down 30% from last October. So October is not going well for me, and had to be reminded that October of last year we had Prime Day. So that tends to skew things. So if you are doing your planning without factoring that Prime Day is not occurring in October, that's going to throw off your sales data. So that's something to keep in mind. Stock outs, if you stock out, you're going to be shortchanging yourself in those future orders. And then deep discounts can also be factored in if you're launching a product or you're doing some deep giveaway that you don't want to be factored into your calculation. So this is what we call daily adjusted velocity. This is true velocity. So this is how you have to start thinking of true velocity. And I want to talk to you about the impact, give you a little bit of a case study about the impact, because if you don't have this piece right, you can end up in trouble. It's essentially you're gambling if you don't figure this data out. A lot of this is available. A lot of this information is available via Amazon downloadable reports, but not everything. And it's not all granular enough for us to be able to calculate. It's very, very difficult to find, you know, those 5 days last year that we were stocked out when we have reports that are only restricted to certain search periods. Okay, so here is the case study on why this stock out algorithm works. You can think of it the same way with a sales spike algorithm, but this is a real world example of a 7-figure Amazon seller that I was talking to, who was working on trying to see if SoStock was going to be a good fit for him. He built his own spreadsheet. And he also had another software. So he was using a software. He'd been using it for years, but had discovered that it continued to cause his best products to stock out. And he couldn't figure out why that was happening until he built out his own spreadsheet. So he was using a software, he was using a spreadsheet override for his best sellers, and he was still stocking out with both of these tools. When he came into SoStock, we predicted his velocity to be much, much higher than what either of those tools were actually offering to him. So when we dug into the data, this is what we found. We looked at the competing software. It was saying 8 units per day was the velocity. He was ordering, so if he ordered 8 units per day, then he was going to end up stocking out. He ordered on a weekly basis. He would stock out by the 4th day of that week. His custom spreadsheet was calculating 10 units per day, and that had him stocking out on the 5th day. We were saying that he was actually doing 15 units per day, and that would keep him from stocking out. So to really understand why the numbers can be so different, we actually have to break it down to what are those things that are being looked at. So first thing to look at is, did you have stock, right? And a lot of these programs, check, did you have stock? Did Amazon, when we ping Amazon and we pull that data from Amazon's API historically, we can see whether you had stock or you did not have stock. So that's one important factor. If you don't have API pulls in your system currently, which would be, say, an Excel spreadsheet, if you're using Excel spreadsheet, the next best thing would be to create a stock out log. And one of the things we have in the DIY spreadsheet is a stock out log. It's a lot more manual, but it's another way to do it. So did you have stock? The second thing is, was there any unusual interruption to your normal sales velocity? So this can be things like lower sales days right before the stock out, or lower sales days coming back from a stock out. Amazon finding and selling a unit or two during a stock out, right, where you get that one day of one sale when you usually have 100 sales per day. Also suspensions. If we're only looking at did you have stock at Amazon, we know that sales suspensions, you'll have a bunch of stock sitting there, but you'll make no sales. So that needs to be factored in as well. So the major error in calculating these stock outs is that most only check for that first one. Did you have stock, right? And so the problem lies in these other areas, these kind of gray areas. If you look at the competing software and how SoStock operates, this is where you get into the differences. Let's say we've got 100 sales a day, and right before a stock out, we have 23 sales. Then we have full stock out, 0 sales. Amazon finds 1 unit, and then full stock out days, and then 13 sales right as you come back into stock. So the way that most of these systems are calculating things is they're looking at each one of these days, because you had sales, they're looking at it through the lens of that was an in-stock day, and they count that towards your average. So what we do is we look at it and we say, if you had 30% or less of your average sales, so if 100 units a day is your normal sales and you sell 29 units, that's going to be a problem. We're going to flag that as a potential stock out day. We're not going to include that in your calculation. What that does is that takes the total number of sales and it adjusts it. It adjusts how many in-stock days there are, and we divide it by in-stock days, not by total days. So over 30-day period, one software can say that you've got 26 in-stock days, and we would say you have 23 in-stock days. And you see that the difference between those two is 10 units per day, which is major, right? As you start to expand this across your entire catalog, it gets to be a pretty hefty nightmare. So moving on from that premise, the other thing that I discovered with inventory and major red flag for a lot of sellers, we're so marketing minded that we forget to worry about the rest of our business, right? We find this new hack, we go to this great event, someone says, I doubled my sales by doing X, Y, and Z. We say, great, I'm going to try that. And we try it and it works fantastically. And it works so great that it stocks us out. It ends up being that when you're not marrying your inventory to your marketing, the marketing team can actually be detrimental to the inventory team and to your overall business, right? Because now we know that marketing actually causing stock outs, that will crash our restock limits. And so when we come back into stock, we get into the stock out cycle where our restock limits are lower because our sales are lower. So getting these two things in sync is extremely important. I like to call it marketing across your entire catalog. And so there are actually 4 things that I recommend sellers to start doing to be able to synchronize these two teams. All right, I'm going to talk about the first one. We'll talk about the other ones later on in this talk. But one of the things I wanted to focus on is just having your marketing team send their marketing plans to the inventory team to vet out. Now, this requires a little bit of back and forth. And I know as marketers, we just want to kind of try something and push it out. But when that causes problems, it actually becomes a lot more expensive to cause your own stock outs than to actually plan this out. because if you cause your own stockouts, then you're doing air freighting to air freight things over. You're doing coupon codes, which maybe you could be selling full price and avoid a stockout. So all of these things tend to add up. And I think that if we were to do an analysis on how much money we've all lost doing these types of things, we would start adopting these policies a lot more quickly. All right, so this is what I mean by inventory-minded marketing. So this is a planner that you guys will be getting. This planner allows your marketing team to give that information. That information includes what velocity are we actually looking at? Are we interested for this product in last year's sales? Are we interested in doing a manual velocity? What is our velocity calculation first and foremost? Then we look at trends. What are we looking at any trends? So year-to-date trends are very popular. You can also add additional sales growth. So if you know that you've been trending upward by 5%, and maybe you want to add 5% to last year's sales, but you also know that you're going to be more aggressive than you were last year, and you're doing a sales campaign, you're doing PPC campaign, you want to add 10% sales growth for this next order. Then you have lightning deals or other sales events. What is the date range and how many total units do you expect to move? And then there's seasonal sales spikes, right? So seasonal sales spikes, summer, maybe your sales increase by 50%. Maybe during January, your sales decrease by 10%. You can add all of these in, and all of these should be able to be programmed into your system. So whether you're using SoStock or our DIY spreadsheet, this should help to correlate this report into what you're able to use for forecasting. All right. So here's one of the reviews. We have a lot of positive reviews on the Amazon App Store. And so this just gives an example of one of our users who started using the stockouts calculation. And he saw that it made a huge increase in the accuracy of his sales velocity, and said he already made thousands of dollars more in profit by just really getting the stockouts calculation right. So that's the big difference between this. It can be the difference between stocking out and not. All right, let us talk about tracking. So now that we have the foundation of our calculation, we know that we're calculating things properly. If we have the number, we have to figure out when do we actually want to order? What is that ordering timeline, and how do we figure that piece out, right? We have the how much, now we need the by when. So we've got something called an order tracker. So there are various different ways to track, and I think it's important to be able to see different views of your tracking. So we'll talk about the different ways to view your tracking, and then we'll get into how you actually come up with those must purchase deadlines. So we have an order tracker, an inventory on hand tracker. So one is a Kanban view. The other one is more of a spreadsheet type view. And it's the ability to see all of your inventory all in one place. Then you have your inbound shipment. So this is just another view of what we saw in the order tracker, which is what is coming in, when is it arriving? It's just a real quick view of your inbound shipments. Then you have your warehouse levels. What is in each warehouse? This is important. Even if you've got your warehouse keeping track of this, I cannot stress enough the importance of cross-checking and auditing your own warehouse. Warehouses can get it wrong, right? And they're not your business. So it's more important for you that your inventory is right than for, say, someone who's handling your inventory along with another, 50 customers. So we have had instances where our warehouse has said that we had less inventory than we had reported on our SoStock account, and then also times where they've said we've had more. And in both instances, we were able to go back and say, this is what we had, this is why, because we actually have a log of all the ins and outs of everything that happens, right? When did we request for inventory to be removed? When did we have inventory arrive at our warehouse? And we're able to then solve the problem by giving them the data and having them go and check it themselves. And then they're able to correct their records so that we're not relying on their records, which could be inaccurate. I think it's very, very important to have that piece nailed down and not to put all of your trust in your warehouse. And then we have orders in the next 30 days. So this is a view that tells you when you need to place the orders, by when and how much. So once we have an idea of being able to track these things, how do we actually come up with that magic number, the by when number? We do that with a couple of things. We need a couple of things. We need buffer stock, which is essentially safety stock. We need lead time, the time it takes to get your inventory from the order placed to actually arriving at its final destination. And those two together is going to tell you what your reorder point is. And then from there, you only need to know when your stock out date would be if you didn't place that order. So buffer stock. So if you're not familiar with buffer stock is like a false zero. It's saying that you want your inventory to never go below a certain point. So we can say 250 units. Perhaps 250 units is a good marker for you. We like to use in days. So for example, we'll say, when I hit 30 days worth of inventory, my next batch of inventory should be arriving. And it gives you that little wiggle room just in case anything goes wrong. You have slower check-in times. You have inventory that's being caught up at the port. You have some snafu that happens at your warehouse. We had a snafu where we had the blades for one of our products were full of moisture. The bags were full of moisture. And so they thought they were going to rust. So things like that happen consistently throughout our business lives. And we need to have this extra cushion. So that's all that a buffer stock is. Some guidelines: the longer the lead time or transfer time, the higher the buffer stock should be. So if it's taking you 90 days to get an order completed and to arrive, that should be longer than if you order on a weekly basis locally and it takes, a week or two to get your inventory into your warehouses. Buffer stock, like I said, it should be, you can do it in units or you can do it in days. I recommend days because especially when you're using a system like SoStock or a similar system that looks at your velocity, your daily velocity, that can fluctuate. As your velocity fluctuates, your buffer stock need is going to fluctuate. You'll need more buffer stock during your high season than you will your low season. So you want a buffer stock that's fluid like that. Then buffer stock can also be used for both FBA and your warehouse. So you should consider doing buffer stock in both of those places. And lastly, one of the guidelines, Amazon has something called geo-ranking. It's a geo-ranking algorithm. Their promise to the seller or the buyers of your product is that they're going to get the inventory there within a certain window of time for Prime Day or for Prime sales, right? 2-day delivery, for example. They want to make sure that they can actually hit that delivery deadline. So they're going to promote products in that buyer's area, and they're going to discourage products if that particular product does not have enough stock to make them feel comfortable with being able to hit that delivery deadline. So you might not notice it in your area, but let's say in the Midwest, you don't have a lot of stock because you have, say, only 10 days of stock, and to distribute 10 days of stock equally throughout the entire country becomes very, very challenging. So Amazon will start lowering you in the ranking, or they'll stop awarding your bids in your PPC campaigns. And you'll see a slowdown in sales just based on the fact that you are carrying a low level of inventory. So a good rule of thumb is a minimum of 30 days of buffer stock. People have had to do less or more based on their restock limits and have wanted to do more based on the slow check-in times of Amazon. So it's kind of a catch-22. You just have to find a good balance, but keep in mind the geo-ranking is an important factor for you also. All right, transfer times and lead times. So these are essentially the same thing. We use the term transfer time to mean the time it takes to go from your warehouse to Amazon, and lead time to mean the overall time from your supplier to the final destination. So these are to be factored. Check with your suppliers, your freight forwarders, your warehouses. These are changing so much that it is extremely important to continue to ask your suppliers and freight forwarders and warehouses what the current time is, right? I would say, asking, once every month or two, depending on the frequency of your turnover, right, and the frequency of your orders, asking a lot more often than we used to. We used to take for granted what it was, but we had a product, for example, that usually took 30 days to produce, and they came back to us and they said it took 4 months. So those are some of the changes that are occurring. There's shortages in aluminum, there's shortages in cardboard, which is extremely important to know because all of us are using cardboard for our cartons. So all of these lead times are shifting, and you need to continually follow up and not find yourself blindsided by having an extremely long lead time. All right, so let's say, for example, 30-day buffer stock and a 60-day lead time. That will help us to pinpoint the reorder date, right? The reorder date would be 30 plus 60 equals 90. So 90 days before your stock out. So you need to know when you could potentially stock out based on your current turnover, and walk it back to 90 days before that point is when you need to order your inventory. And that's how we do everything. We actually use something called an inventory timeline. If you're not using SoStock, I recommend you set one of these things up as a way of helping you to calculate your reorder point. It basically runs through the daily velocity burn, as well as any inventory you have coming in, any inventory you have in your warehouse, and being able to calculate when you need to send things so that you don't run out of stock. Quick case study. So we had someone come into SoStock who had a pattern of ordering too late, right? There were no systems in place to track. There were no systems in place to alert. It was, doing everything on your own as a solopreneur or a small team and going, oh shoot, we're probably running out of inventory. We need to actually reassess everything, download the reports, and calculate everything, and then notice that, oh wow, we're 2 weeks late and we're actually going to have to do some air shipping. So when this seller who was facing this dilemma put SoStock into place and specifically got dialed in on his reorder point, he was able to cut down the amount of air shipments, and the inventory costs for shipping went from $1.20 to 45 cents per unit. So that was a 63% reduction in shipping cost. And if you were to extend that cost savings over the entire business, it actually ended up being $150,000 in shipping costs. There are a lot of savings to be made in shipping costs if you can really start getting this part dialed in. So that's just kind of one of the ways to accent the importance of knowing your restock limits and having a system where you are constantly assessing those things, pulling actual data quickly so that when things change, you can react accordingly. All right, here's another seller who was able to streamline processes with the real visibility of what his restock limits and what his reorder points were, and would no longer have to do expensive air shipment. So that helped to improve his business exponentially. All right, then we have the logistics pillar. This is the one that gets a little bit heady. So I'm recording this, so if you have to come back and watch over it again, feel free to do that. But we will be going through some of these points pretty quickly, but it's important to understand the basics of Amazon's inventory algorithm, which is what I'm going to go over. All right, so obviously we know that the supply chain and restock limits are causing huge problems, and that if you don't become flexible, you're going to have issues. And some of you are probably already facing some of that, even with as prepared as you have had to become over the last 18 months or so. So we're going to talk about Amazon's storage type limits first, and then I'm going to talk about some of the logistics reorganization, and then get into some trucking. All right, so to start off, we need to understand that Amazon never intended to be a storage facility. Amazon always intended to be a distribution center. They're trying to get back to that point, and they are doing it in a way that is very damaging to a lot of people's businesses, very difficult, but at the same time, they're trying to improve. They're trying to build new systems, new programs. They're just pretty much drowning right now. So we've seen that drowning, the drowning in terms of check-in times, in terms of actually getting the logistics part of their business figured out. And that is why it's important to understand how these algorithms work and how we can benefit from them. So the first thing to know is that Amazon's #1 algorithm for inventory is sell-through. Sell-through is what their objective is. They want inventory to come in and they want it to go out. They don't want a lot of stale products sitting there. So we need to understand how Amazon's sell-through rate works. Amazon's sell-through rate is a main factor for restock limits. Of course, they're looking at historical sales over certain periods of time, so holiday sales and things like that. There's other things that go into the algorithm that we don't know at this time, and we probably will never know, similar to the rest of the A9 algorithm. There's other things that we don't know, but it's good to understand that this is one of the foundational points. I will give you the caveat that there is something that I like to refer to as Amazon's oh shit lever. And what Amazon's oh shit lever is something we've all experienced, where you wake up and your restock limits have decreased by 30%, 50%, 70%, all of a sudden overnight. That is nothing to do with the Amazon algorithm and everything to do with the fact that there's chaos at the warehouses. And that's what we'll be getting into when we talk about trucking. The chaos in the warehouses is a big part of why you have these sudden tankings of restock limits. But just as we don't stop, using PPC, doing, listing optimization, we don't stop those best practices simply because, one day Amazon might decide to suspend our listing for a couple of weeks. Just as we don't break those best practices because that happens, we should not break the best practices for inventory management just because they tank our restock limits every now and then. So to understand Amazon's algorithm, we have to understand how they look at sell-through. And this definition has actually come straight from Amazon themselves. So on their website in Seller Central, says your FBA rolling 90-day sell-through rate is the number of your units sold and shipped over the past 90 days divided by the average number of units available at fulfillment centers during that time. So to look at that, how it's laid out, we want to look at units sold and shipped in 90 days. And then that would be divided by the average units available. So if you sell 9,000 units in 90 days and you keep an average of 3,000 units over that same period of time, the turnover rate would be a monthly turnover rate, and you would see the number 3 in your sell-through section. If you're not aware of where to find this data, it's in the inventory dashboard under performance dashboard, and you'll be able to see what your sell-through rate is. On that same vein, if you had 9,000 units of sales and you carried 9,000 units, that sell-through rate would be 1 or would be a quarterly turnover. So that is how to figure out what your sell-through rate means when you actually see that little number, whether it's 2.2 or 1.3, whatever it is. Now you know what Amazon's looking at. So I want to go back a second to clarify things. So this says FBA rolling 90-day sell-through. This, I believe, is an old definition, because we're going to go through some things that also contribute to sell-through and also contribute to restock levels that is becoming more well known, but that is still not known by the community in general. I did a talk recently, and I asked everyone to raise their hand at an event I spoke at, and asked them, did you know X contributes to restock limits? Raise your hand. And I was surprised at how few people actually raised their hand. I thought it was a well-known thing. So we're going to go over some of those things to re-qualify and revalidate sell-through and restock limit effects. All right. So first we're going to go over utilization. So utilization is part of sell-through. The things that are calculated in utilization are, according to Amazon, FBA available inventory, all incoming shipments, right? Working, in transit, receiving, and then unfulfillable inventory is also calculated as part of that, which is, things like stranded inventory or unfulfillable, meaning broken or damaged, those types of things. The things that they say that they did not indicate were part of utilization are removal orders or reserved inventory. However, we have found that not to be true. Removal orders, while they're still being processed, are still contributing to utilization. So while you're trying to remove stuff, as Amazon's taking the week or however long it takes to remove those things, you're still not able to send inventory into Amazon against that. Reserved inventory can include removal orders, but it also includes inventory that's checking into or being transferred between fulfillment centers. So just know that removal orders and reserved inventory, while on the books and on record is said not to contribute to utilization, we have found, yes, it does contribute to utilization, and it will take up that space for you until that's cleared out. All right, so again, the relationship between sell-through and utilization. So we saw this average units available on the bottom. That actually is, we can consider that pretty much the same as utilization, right? What's our average utilization? One thing to note, this might be a little bit, this is just a thing I'm going to add. It might be a little bit heady for some people, but we're going to go into FBM and how FBM actually contributes to utilization. And I will talk a little bit about how you can use FBM to bolster this sell-through statistic even more effectively than most of us at first thought. All right, so a quick case study. So we had someone who focused on handling their sell-through, had about 300 SKUs, and worked over the course of 4 months to increase, to basically double their sell-through rate. So that's something that can be done pretty quickly if you have that as a target and if you're watching that. And that, of course, helped to improve IPI score, helps to improve restock limits. But that's something that if you are, especially if you're having trouble with your IPI score, that's something that you should definitely focus on. First, foremost, and always is sell-through rate. It's actually, if you break down the components of the IPI score, they all in some way circle back to being a component of sell-through. All right, so let's get into, now that we understand that, let's get into understanding logistics problems and then restock limits and how to avoid restock limits crashes with, like I mentioned, the 3 levers that you can pull, one of them being FBM, and I'll get into details on exactly why and how that is. All right, so the first golden rule that I usually offer is to never let anyone have all your stuff, to always have a backup plan, have a plan, A, have a plan B, and have a plan C. And be flexible. So that would look like something like this. Always have the ability to send something by ocean and also by air. So if that means you have to create a larger order with your supplier, have them hold some of your inventory. They'll usually hold it for a time without you having to pay storage fees. And they'll often hold it and not require you. You can negotiate for them not to require you to pay for the inventory until it has shipped out. So if your ocean freight, it is shipped out, they'll usually start the clock ticking on that and will release the bill of lading once you've paid them for that inventory. But then you can have some backup inventory to send in case you need it and not incur that cost. So what we've been doing is we'll send most stuff by ocean, we'll hold a batch at our supplier, and we'll only send it by air if some catastrophe happens. And, like is common to experience, ocean freight doesn't arrive at your 3PL within the time frame necessary. So if you have all your stuff on the ocean, you can't do anything about it. But if you have some stuff sitting at your supplier, you can air freight it over. And then you can send things directly to FBA. You can send things via air to your 3PL. You can, send things from ocean via that same method. So the whole idea is that you have inventory in various different places so that you can pull the trigger. Because if you have no ability to send anything into one of these places because everything is at one place. So for example, Amazon. If Amazon, you send your inventory to Amazon and they don't check your inventory in, they basically are holding your business hostage until they check it in. So you have to have all of these various different methods, right? So the question is, okay, that's fine, but what if I do stock out? What are those things that I can do if I do stock out to not tank my restock limits? All right, So some of these things, switch to FBM. I've been hinting at it a lot, but FBM sales actually contribute to your restock limits. First of all, they keep Amazon from holding your business hostage. Amazon should not be your only distribution channel, even if it's your only sales channel. So switching to FBM allows you the ability to take sales via the Amazon platform and fulfill them and have that direct line to fulfill them to your customer. So if you don't have an FBM method, now is the time to get one. We're end of October right now. So there's a lot of these fulfillment centers are filling up, and it's very, very important that you send some inventory to FBM. You find a good warehouse that can do fulfillment for you. Because not having that option going into Q4, I think, is very dangerous. But guess what? The same poll that I did about, who understood FBM, how many of you have an FBM system? And very few raised their hands. And so that shows me that if you have that, but your competitors don't, and they likely don't based on those surveys, your competitors don't have FBM. Once they have problems with their inventory, you have an option to continue to outsell them, even though you may not be able to get stock into Amazon. The other factor, again, is FBM sales contribute to your restock limits. So when we looked at the total number of sales that Amazon's using to calculate restock limit, the FBM sales are part of that. So it's FBA sales and it's FBM sales. The thing that can be very, very effective in helping your sell-through rate is you've got those FBM sales, and then you also have the utilization not being affected by having your warehouse inventory outside of the FBM fulfillment centers. So you actually have the ability to further influence those restock limits by using FBM. All right, so back to the golden rule. So we have 3PL, and we have a couple of different ways that we can truck inventory into Amazon, right? FTL, LTL. You can also do, that's a less than truckload, full truckload, or some people are sending in containers. All of those things, you need to also have the ability to send small parcel delivery. It's more expensive, but if you put all of your inventory into a truck and you send it to Amazon and you don't get your inventory checked in, that's a problem. So you need to be able to have that backup inventory sitting at your warehouse to truck it in and truck it in the right way. So I'll talk to you about the types of trucking companies that you should be working with, and how you can prevent getting your inventory delivered to Amazon and then take 3-4 weeks to get it actually checked in. Why is that happening, and how can we prevent that? And then, of course, like I mentioned, FBM, having FBM as a backup is a must, in my opinion. All right, so let's see. So we'll get into trucking in a minute, but the other things that I wanted to talk about are essentially what are those other things that can help to bolster your restock limits. So if we run out of our best seller, and we know that our sales are going to tank, and that our restock limits could tank along with it, what are those other things we can do? So we can do FBM if we have some inventory to send in FBM. That helps to push that. We can also move excess inventory using other SKUs, running flash sales, running lightning deals, these types of things. Any inventory that you have, the beauty of, I know a lot of people were really frustrated and complain a lot about the storage type restock limits. And there's a lot of problems with it just in how they're calculating it. But the benefit of storage type restock limits is that you can use your entire catalog to manipulate your restock limits. You can run those excess inventory sales with other SKUs that you may have. Maybe you pulled out a bunch of overstock inventory. That's the time to start doing a flash sale. Send an email out to your list. Send, do some sort of an offer, a discount giveaway or something like that. Find ways to move that inventory through Amazon using either FBM or using FBA. Do that to help to keep your limits maintained while you're working to get your top seller back in stock. So here are a couple of the things that you need to note Removal orders are would not be considered flash sales. They would not be considered to improve your restock limits at all. Removal orders are great for immediately removing inventory. If you are stuck and you have, you're stuck in a bind and you have no way to get your best sellers in, you could do a removal order. They don't benefit sell-through. They don't benefit restock limits. Removal orders include removal orders, disposal orders, and also liquidation. Amazon has a new liquidation program. Sell-through would be something that it takes some time. It helps you to recover some of your inventory or some of your capital back rather. And it's going to benefit your sell-through, and it's going to benefit your restock. Things like that could be lightning deals, coupon codes, all of these things that we know about, but also check out lightning deals. Outlet deals. Outlet deals will be available to you in the inventory page. If you go into excess inventory, you can see if any of your products are eligible for outlet deals as well. All right. Temporarily borrow your sales velocity from other channels. So I'm not sure how many of you have known, but multi-channel fulfillment sales contribute to your sales velocity. This is important to know because there's actually been a lot of things that have been going on with multi-channel fulfillment and the multi-channel fulfillment team boosting people's restock limits just simply by becoming part of a program that they have going on. Again, I'm not going to get into it on here. You can go to sostocks.com/restock and find out more about that program. It was extremely effective for some people in the third quarter, people seeing their restock limits double, etc. But multi-channel fulfillment sales do contribute to your sales velocity. So if you have Shopify sales, you can get Amazon to fulfill those Shopify sales. Don't do it with Walmart. Walmart will disconnect or deactivate your account or suspend you if you fulfill Walmart sales using Amazon. So definitely don't do that. But other channels that you may have that are able to be fulfilled through multi-channel, that those sales will basically help to boost those restock limits, boost your sales velocity, so that you can continue to be sure that your sales velocity doesn't tank when your inventory is ready to send back in. All right, I see we've got a couple of questions. I'll definitely circle back to those questions. Yeah, we'll get to those questions for sure. All right, so now I want to talk about, so we were talking about how to coordinate marketing, right? You've got all of these things that you can do to prepare for the possibility of stocking out. How can you make sure that your restock limits are going to be maintained? How can you make sure that you're going to have enough room to send your inventory in? What if you've got inventory that's clogging your system? And how can we set up systems to make sure that we maintain healthy restock limits, we maintain healthy levels, and we don't find ourselves basically painting ourselves into a corner. We've been painting ourselves into a corner for years and years by letting stale inventory stack up, and we haven't realized it until Amazon finally just pulled the plug out from under us. So these are the reports that I recommend people have their inventory teams set up and send to marketing on a weekly or a monthly basis. The stock out risk report, the slow seller report, the liquidation report, and the overstock report. Inventory, if they send these reports to marketing, marketing can use this data to either stop pushing a certain product if it's about to stock out, pushing products that look like they're at risk of clogging the FBA system, and also pushing overstock products. So this should be part of your marketing strategy. It shouldn't only be to drive revenue, it also needs to be to drive sell-through, just based on the fact that I think restock limits are here to stay. I don't think they're ever going away. All right, so here would be a slow seller report. I like to look at a range, right? You want to look at, okay, let's say 20 sales. Once it's hit 20 sales, it's good. This is a good product. Between 5 sales and 20 sales, that's a product that's slow, but maybe we can recover it. So you can set kind of a product range, a sales range. Similarly, with a liquidation report, we look at only products that are, say, selling less than 5 units, right? This could be different for your business, but you have to set the parameters based on what is going to be effective for you. An overstock, anything over 90 days, we could even go anything over 60 days. That would be overstock. That would be something that would call our attention and create a list for our marketing team to know that they need to push those products. All right. Okay, fantastic. All right, so I like to say what the truck, so let's talk about trucking. Trucking is going to be extremely important to understand moving into this, this last quarter of the year. So I just wanted to kind of go over some points about trucking. I don't have really too many slides on this. So I'm actually going to stop and I'm going to share my screen and just grab my notes on this. I talked to, like I mentioned, I talked to Sebastiano Scassi. He is the owner of Amazing Logistics and provided extremely valuable insight, helped to explain how all of these programs work, how the trucking industry works, what are those different types of relationships that Amazon has with their ground freight. So I wanted to talk about a couple of those things. One of the things is to talk about how contracts, trucking contracts work within Amazon now. Amazon launched something called Amazon Freight. Amazon Freight is a really smart idea and is trying to solve a problem, but it actually created a whole other problem of its own. Basically, they give you the trailers, and they give the trailers to the truckers, they give them to the trucking companies, and essentially say, okay, we're going to pay you to be a trucker for us. You drop off this trailer and you leave. So they drop off the trailer, a full trailer, and they leave with an empty trailer. What started happening is that Amazon stopped actually being able to empty those trailers fast enough. The truckers kept coming and dropping them off, and then you've got all these trailers piling up in their yard, not getting emptied out. And so when you have a product that some inventory that arrives at Amazon and it sits there for 3 or 4 weeks, it's delivered but not checked in, this is why. It's because Amazon has this relationship with some trucking companies, whether it's Amazon Freight or another trucking company. These trucking companies are Amazon partner carriers. So if you're an Amazon partner carrier, you basically have a contract that says you have to drop your stuff off. You have to drop off the full trailer, and drive away, right? You can come pick it up later. And so that's what's happening to a lot of our inventory. We used to think that Amazon partner carriers were the best because they got the premium appointments, and they do get the premium appointments. The problem is that they have to drop their stuff off. The non-Amazon partner carriers right now are, while more costly, they are more reliable to getting your stock checked in. And the reason is this: there are carriers that say, I will drive up to your dock and I will empty my stuff into your warehouse. I am not leaving without my trailer. I'm not dropping off my trailer. And that makes a huge difference. So even if Amazon partner carriers get an earlier appointment to drop off, the net check-in time of non-Amazon partner carriers is generally going to be faster during this time, simply because they're not able to unload things quickly enough. So non-Amazon partner carriers, again, they are more costly, but your net check-in time is faster. Even if you don't get an early check, even if you don't get an early delivery time, right? The check-in time is faster because the delivery date is the check-in date. They check it in. It's not deliver it and then wait 4 weeks for them to finally empty it. All right, so that's important to know. The other thing to note is trailer numbers. Our Sebastiano, he and his company have started to note down trailer numbers. This is something that you may share with your 3PL and say, hey, is it possible to start noting down the trailer numbers when you send my inventory to Amazon? There is no place where you can contact people and find this information after the fact necessarily. So you need to start kind of paying attention to getting this information, because once your stuff goes out to Amazon, Amazon may have a hard time finding your inventory. So having the trailer number, they can go in and they can look their records in and track by trailer number. If you know your stuff is in a certain trailer, they'll be able to trace that back. Things have happened where they've been able to trace trailer numbers to finding out, oh yes, it's buried in our yard. It is here, but it's buried in our yard. Or things like what happened to one of Sebastiano's clients is it was supposed to go to Nevada. Well, that truck somehow got swapped and went to California. So his inventory, his Nevada inventory was sitting in California. And because this was Nevada inventory, the California warehouse said, that's not ours. We can't check it in, it's not ours. And so there actually had to be an authorization, an override and say, check that into California. Yes, we know it was supposed to go to Nevada. We'll check it in and then our transfer system will sort it out later. So those are some of the things that are happening. That's some of the chaos that is going on. It's pretty crazy, but it's something that I think is extremely important to know. Non-partner carriers, talk to your warehouse, talk to them about these types of things, just to safeguard yourself, to make sure that your stuff doesn't get checked in, not get checked in based solely on the trucking company you use. All right. Quick share, screen share, and then let's see, where is it? Okay, we're gonna go through some of this really quick because we are running close to the time, and I want to make sure to get up to all of your questions. So again, to thank you for staying, a special gift for staying to the end, the inventory DIY spreadsheet, the inventory minded marketing planner, cash flow checklist, inventory management SOPs. You will get that in your email. You will also get a replay for this video, the webinar. And now that I've showed you how to create the systems, what systems you need to implement, I want to show you how to implement those things faster. Just give you a little overview on what we do currently here at SoStock. So we have a customizable forecasting per SKU on a per SKU basis, right? It includes restock limits. We assess and your inventory needs per restock limit. So based on your restock limits, what inventory do you need to send in? What's vitally important to send in? And assess it from that perspective. We also use various different ways of calculating velocity that can be custom set by SKU, as well as sales spikes, stock outs, additional sales growth, and trends being added. The inventory timeline that I talked about. We also have the order tracker that I mentioned, which also does transfer tracking your transfers from third-party warehouse to FBA. Customizable inventory dashboards. These are all customized based on what you want to see. We've got about 80 different columns that can be hidden or moved, as well as filters for all of those different columns. So you can filter to only see what you need to see for any specific reporting. Then we have PO and transfer creation. We didn't really talk much about this. We're getting more into PO and transfer creation, why this is extremely important. And you'll be seeing some blogs come out on that subject as well if you go to blog.sostock.com. This is just a ton of people who have said some really cool things. I work with a lot of these sellers. The first year and a half, I worked with sellers. I was pretty much, I was the only one who was doing onboarding. We loved working with our sellers because it makes us feel very, very smart. I'm a seller myself, but I don't claim to know everything about every single business regarding inventory. And we get to learn a lot more because we have the relationships with our users that we do. So I always like to get the scoop from them regarding that. So anyway, that's a bit about us. If you're interested in the software, if you don't have the software yet, we have an intro rate, $79 for the first month. And what that includes as a part of signing up within the next, say, 48 hours for the webinar, you can have a skip the line priority access. I'm offering a personal inventory consultation with that. So if you do sign up, reach out to the support desk and say, hey, Chelsea mentioned that I could have a consultation. I'm happy to consult you, especially moving into the fourth quarter if you're feeling a little bit shaky about the structure of your current logistics and would like a second opinion or like some advice. We also do one-on-one onboarding as part of that. Make sure that you understand the software. We've been known to work multiple times. If people need multiple calls, we've done that before, but that's usually some rare cases that's needed. And then white glove migration. If you have your data in a spreadsheet, you have your data in some other software, you can come to us and give us that data, and we can help to move that data into your systems, including forecast settings and custom dashboards for you. All right, I wanted to jump into the Q&A. I know I saw a couple of questions that were being asked, so let's jump into the Q&A real quick. And again, you can go to sostock.com you can go to sostock.com, and sostock.com is where you can reach more information about how to sign up for SoStock, what the pricing structure is, go into booking a demo. All of that can be done at sostock.com. If you want to reach out to me or connect with me, go to sostock.com/connect. My socials are there, my email, the links to the demo, all of those things are there. Let me go ahead and answer some of your guys' questions. All right, so Bailey says, does SoStock factor in last year's sales when helping you plan or suggest your spikes? Yes, so you can select last year's sales and it'll look back over the past year and be able to identify sales spikes and stock outs, and you'll be able to open up and say, okay, anything that is considered a stock out, I want to remove it. You can apply it to all of your products. You can go into individual products and specialize, which days do you consider stock outs or not. So it's very, very customizable, but it looks back and analyzes all of that data. Someone says, I find the last year's sales data isn't accurate and seems like a guess more than actual data pulled from Amazon. Yeah, so what we're pulling is actual last year's sales data. Amazon's algorithms to try to, and their recommendations are not very good. As we can see that Amazon, their algorithm does not factor stock outs into their equations, as we can see from restock limits being affected by that. They don't have the ability, they haven't programmed the ability to give you the benefit of the doubt when you stock out. All right, and then Darren says, sorry for the interruption, but I can't see where is the recommended quantity to ship to the FBA. Considering the velocity of the items. Let me stop sharing. I'm not sure if I understand that. Let's see if I can get a clarification on that question. Let's see. I can't see where the recommended quantity to ship to FBA. Okay, so I think I know what you're saying. So what you're going to want to do is you go into the inventory section. In the inventory section, go to your inventory dashboard. Under the inventory dashboard is called inventory performance, the inventory performance dashboard. If you scroll down to the bottom, there's a little line that says restock limits and a line below that says storage volume, I believe. You click on it and it'll expand up and it will give you your restock limits. You can do that. You would want to do that for every single marketplace. Each marketplace has a different limit. If you're below the threshold for your IPI limits, which at this point should be 450. They change it every now and then. But if you're below that point for inventory limits, you're going to want to also look at your storage volume, and you'll have storage volume limits as well. So try to keep your IPI score up high enough so that you don't have limitations on restock, which is units, and volume, which is the amount of space, because those can conflict. And if you don't have enough space, even though Amazon says you can send in 3,000 units, your volume might limit you to, say, based on the size of your products, 2,000 units, for example. All right, another question from Rohan. It seems that you are addressing the problem of ordering lesser inventory well, but the ultimate goal is to optimize. How do you work on that so we don't order excess inventory? So optimizing, part of that is sales spikes, right? Making sure that your sales spikes are properly calculated. Ordering too much inventory often happens because you are not calculating your data properly. So I didn't go into an example of that. We covered the stock out portion, but sales spikes is another reason that that happens. For example, you know, one year we were mentioned on, it's like Good Morning America or something like that, one of our products, and that caused this massive sales spike. That sales spike can then be caught by SoStock, or if you're doing it manually, you need to track that and note that that is not a normal day. This needs to be removed from our calculation. So that would be one thing. The other thing regarding excess inventory is maybe to restructure the way that you are doing business with your suppliers. So a lot of people, because it's so unpredictable, because it's so difficult to determine how long it's going to take, people have been placing larger orders, but like what we have done, placing larger orders less frequently, but keeping some inventory at our supplier's warehouse. So our supplier personally doesn't charge us for having our inventory there for a couple of months. Eventually they'll start saying, hey, you need to move this inventory, right, based on whatever agreement you have, but also that they're not going to be charging us. We don't have to pay for the inventory until we remove it. So we can place larger orders to have more flexibility, and at the same time, our cash flow isn't affected. So it's not only that we're trying to control our excess inventory, a lot of the excess inventory issues are restock limits, are storage costs, and are also large outlays of capital that get tied up by paying our supplier. So if you can adjust the payment terms with your supplier, if you can have your supplier store some inventory for free or very low cost, you cut down on your storage. And if you're not sending it into Amazon, that is a preventative measure as well. I think a lot of people have pulled a lot of excess inventory and are now holding excess inventory. Some of these things that need to be addressed are whether it makes sense to use a liquidation service or not. But those are kind of, I guess, the general questions. If I didn't answer your question fully, feel free to type something into the chat and I'll be able to expand upon it. Doran says, seems that I was not so clear with my question. I meant, I cannot see anywhere in SoStock system the value recommended to ship to FBA. Is there anything like that? Oh yeah, so yes, I'm not really logged into SoStock right now. Each portion of, once you do your calculation, so what you're gonna have to do when you are using SoStock is you're actually going to have to, you pick your velocity, you pick your lead time, and how often you are ordering, right? If you're ordering every 3 months, if you're ordering based on a set of parameters. Let's go to, sorry, I just wanted to jump in and be able to show you. If you're ordering based on a set of parameters, you set up your parameters, and then very importantly, you take the data from your marketing team, you put all of that into your inventory plans, and then you're going to get a recommendation. So those are all of the pieces that are needed for a forecast. Let me quickly share so you can see the picture. All right, so you set your velocity, right? Whatever the velocity is that is important for you to set. You set your order schedule here, right? As needed. I want to do, have 30 days of buffer stock and then 60 days of maximum stock. And then I want to make sure that all of my sales events are planned, right? So your sales events are planned here. Lightning deals, seasonal sales spikes, all of those things. And you can see them showing up here, right? In the inventory timeline. And so what is being done is that we're then looking at, based on your parameters, what are you going to need to order right now? And so it'll actually give you, we can go to orders within 30 days. Okay, so there's nothing there. Let's do orders within a time frame, and it's going to give you for each supplier all of the products that need to be ordered. And then you can place that order. We can say, okay, actually, I'm not going to be ordering this anymore. I want to turn off the orders. I no longer want to order this product. This product is being liquidated. And then we can have it removed from that calculation. And all we're ordering are these 2 products. Then we can click the order all button and it creates a PO. So that's how our system works. Our system is designed to be able to look at all that data and then also can be used to factor restock limits. So we can put our restock limits in here. Amazon does not give that to us via the API. So you just have to come in here whenever your restock limits are updated and add them for each marketplace and for each storage type. And then everything will be calculated based on the restock limit. Your recommendations will be adjusted based on restock limits, right? So I hope that answers that question. Let me go ahead and stop sharing so that I can, oops. So I can make sure that I answered that question. Okay, great, fantastic. Ben had to jump off, fantastic. Ben will send you the replay. And then the question is for quantity. The question is for quantity. SoStock recommends me to ship. Okay, so I've already set up the limits. Okay, yes, so hopefully, yeah, hopefully that is answering your question now. You also have the ability to look at what needs to be transferred, right? So you have the orders and you have the transfers. So it sounds like you got everything. We've answered all of the questions on that. But again, if you need any help, if you're having trouble, please set up a call or reach out to our customer support. You can reach out to them at helpme@sostocked.com and they'll be able to help you out. If you haven't done your onboarding call, the onboardings are great because they'll give you, make sure they'll look over your full account, make sure that everything makes sense, answer any questions that you might have, and then even potentially point you in the direction of some tools that you can utilize for your specific business that you maybe hadn't explored yet. All right, Rohan says, looks like the last question. Thank you guys so much for being on this webinar. I hope that this was very helpful to you. So Rohan's question is, okay, I think we answered this question. It's the same excess inventory question. Okay, fantastic. Looks like that's the last of the questions. Go ahead and check us out at sostock.com. I do a lot of blog posts. We are building out lots of little tools to help you guys with all of these things. We're working on building out an FBA calculator that is more in depth than the FBA calculators that you find, say, on other websites or on Amazon itself. We're also working on something called a shipping RFQ, which is request for quote, to help you to better communicate with your suppliers and your freight forwarders so that you know that you're giving them all the data that is needed. All of these things, if you have any recommendations, any suggestions, if you need help with anything, I love to hear those things so that I can start to recognize that this is some education that is maybe needed within that area. But yeah, I love to hear from you guys. If you guys have any questions, I will be sending this replay. I will be sending those freebies. Thank you guys so much for being here. And I hope you have a fantastic fourth quarter sales, that everything goes off without a hitch or as well as it possibly could, given all of the chaos that we're experiencing. And I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks, guys.